Today we're going to be talking about the history of Union Township. That is our 6th township in its organization, Union being here, just east of the Anderson Township. A map of Union Township. Union's the smallest township in Madison County with 19.5 square miles within its borders. But when it was first organized as the county's 6th township on May 3rd, 1830, it was much larger than it is today. As originally carved out from Anderson Township by order of the Board of County Commissioners, it encompassed 63 square miles. Its northern part was eventually absorbed with the organization of Richland Township in 1834, Monroe Township in 1836, and Van Buren in 1837, creating its present size. The commissioners designated the name of Union without leaving any explanation for the choice. Over time, some believed it was given that name on account of its being located opposite the point where the counties of Henry, Delaware, and Madison form a union. And I show that to you here with a Google Earth shot. This is Madison County, Delaware County, and Henry County, and this is Union Township. And all three counties come together at that point. If you come down on the ground, this is what it looks like. I'm in Madison County, and here is Henry County, and here is Delaware County. The more widely accepted reason is that the name was selected in recognition of the Federal Union of States. You see, that explanation is more reasonable owing to the fact that by 1830, the United States of America had successfully withstood 2 attempts by England, 1775 to 1783, and then again 1812 and 1815, to defeat us, and it was no longer threatened. In other words, the Union was forged by two wars was now secure. William Dilts, 1793 to 1874. William Dilts is believed to be the first settler. He arrived from Montgomery County, Ohio in March of 1821, and he settled on the east bank of Mill Creek in what is now Chesterfield. He remained at this site for about 4 years, but not having sufficient financial means to enter the land, in other words, purchase it, it was claimed from under him by Joshua Baxter in 1824. That is the site. That is the site. Now, disregard the home that's there. That was not William Dilts' home, but that's where that was the property that he settled on. Mr. Dilts then moved to Delaware County, where he remained for 4 years. And in 1829, he returned and he entered 160 acres of land in the same section he previously occupied, only on the south side of the road that is now Indiana 32. He erected a double-pen log house in which he established the first hotel in the township. About 1833, he built a large brick house, the first in the township. So he first settles here in 1825, and then he moves back to Ohio, but when he comes back, he buys this property here. And I don't know how many of you remember this. I can. This photograph was taken when the shingles used to have the 1833 on the shingles. Today, that's not the case, but I always thought that was pretty neat that you could do that. Today, the house has gone through several different changes of colors and so forth. It looked like this for a while. And my wife and I had an opportunity to tour this house several years ago through a friend of ours that knew the lady that lived there, and she got permission from that lady for us to go in, and we went all through the first and second floors, and boy, oh boy, do the stairs creak, and every board and every floor creaks, and when you go upstairs, you gotta duck down and so forth, but it was a neat place, really a neat place. Frederick Brandenburg Sr., 1775 to 1853, it was at the site of the William Dilts' first log cabin that Frederick Brandenburg Sr. stopped with his family in June of 1821. He was on his way to the prairie country in Illinois when one of his oxen gave out. That's one of the stories. Another story is that an infant child that was with them took sick and died, and they buried it. and she did not want to leave. I don't know which story is true. Maybe they both are. While seeking assistance from Mr. Diltz, Brandenburg was told there was no roads to speak of farther west. Thus, he decided to locate in this area. He moved his family into an abandoned cabin that had previously been occupied by an Indian trader named McChester. In the spring of 1822, he built a cabin of his own north of White River. Remember that. Nearby, he erected a sawmill. Now, that sawmill was on this side of the White River. You recognize the Timberline campground here and the back road into Chesterfield that takes you over to Lindbergh Estates, Emerald Glen. His sawmill, we are fairly certain, was along this gristmill sawmill. We were fairly certain it was along there, and in fact, I went down on the surface and I took this picture. Burrs for grinding both corn and wheat were added later. How many of you have been by the Timberline campground? Have you ever noticed the signage? They're millstones. Several of them, as a matter of fact. I went up to the office, and the little girl that was in there, I asked her, I said, "Where did those stones come from?" And she says, "I don't know." She says, "Let me call the owner for you." So she called the owner of the campground. The owner of the campground said, "They were there when I bought the campground from somebody else." And he said, "I asked him, where did those come from?" And he said, he told me that they came from over on White River, west of the campground, and they drug them over here. So I can't say for sure, but it's pretty strong evidence there that those are probably stones from Brandenburg's mill. The family eventually became large landholders in the county, particularly in Union Township. One of the children was Carol Brandenburg. This home is out across from the Brandenburg Cemetery. I think it's beautiful. I had a friend who knew a person who lived in, anybody ever been in the house, first of all? Okay, I'm told, this friend of mine told me he was in there, and it was a snowy day, and they'd been out sledding on the slopes, and they went in, and in the fireplace that was in the kitchen was a fireplace that you could kind of step into, and they had a big boiling pot of beans and ham and so forth. There is I'm told that there is underneath the front porch, there is an access to a tunnel. And the tunnel comes out this way, across the road, and across the road used to be a barn for the family. And so I assume that maybe in blizzard conditions, the tunnel was access to the barn to take care of the animals. Don't know that to be a fact. But someone told me, he said, no, that's not what happened. That was for Underground Railroad. And I said, no. That house was built in 1867, 2 years after the Civil War. So no Underground Railroad activity at that time. But it is a pretty place. And this is a picture of Frederick Brandenburg Sr. I think of all of the original settlers to the townships in our county, the only one that we have an image of is Frederick Brandenburg Sr. for here in Union Township. This is a plaque on the home of his son, Frederick Brandenburg Jr., which you all recognize as being in the Mounds Park. And the friends of the park out there take care of it, do a nice job. I've got several pictures of it. Bromberg Cemetery, opened in 1836. This says 1918. I assume that is an addition when the cemetery was enlarged. Amasa Makepeace, 1777 to 1848. A major influence in the development of Chesterfield was the arrival of Amasa Makepeace. He and his wife Betsy were married about 1800 in Norton, Massachusetts. The couple moved to Chesterfield, New Hampshire, where they remained until 1818 when they and their children moved west, eventually arriving here in 1823. In between, they had a stint in what is today West Virginia. A stone in the ground denoting the Makepeace Farm in 1823, and that is right here on Plum Street. Here's Mill Creek. This is State Road 32, and this right here where my arrow is pointing is that plaque you just saw indicating the Makepeace Farm. In 1825, Makepeace built the first grist mill on Mill Creek, affording the settlers on the east central part of the county a place to take their grain to have it ground. Old picture there is supposedly the old Makepeace mill. That's not a Makepeace, it's labeled as Dr. C.L. Armington. But the park where it was located, the ground was located, is here in the Makepeace Park. I'll back it up so you can kind of see the slope. What this had to be could not have been a typical water wheel mill. There's no water access to it other than Mill Creek, which is down in here. So more than likely that was a steam-powered mill. And water source was Mill Creek. They just take the water up to a boiler and boil it and get the steam off of it to operate the mill. West Union, Mill Creek, Chesterfield. The couple's son Allen is credited with the laying out of the town in 1830. Known first as West Union, it was renamed Chesterfield in 1834. Because Allen was given the responsibility of laying out the town, it seems natural that his influence caused the town to be named Chesterfield, naming after his birthplace in New Hampshire in 1802. A pioneer custom practiced all across our nation, quite common, as the pioneers began to move west and they would plat new towns, found new towns. Many times they would name those towns after the town they came from. So you can see, if you look at a map of the United States, you'll see names along the East Coast, and then you'll see them repeat in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Hardscrabble here in Madison County is another example of that. And you see the arrow pointing to Chesterfield here in 1838. It was known as Chesterfield then, but also 1839, it's known as West Union. So apparently the town and the map makers were wrestling with what to name it, kind of like you do down in Adams Township today, where they're wrestling with New Columbus and Ovid. They still haven't resolved that one. When the Indianapolis and Bellefonte Railroad was completed through Madison County in 1852, Chesterfield experienced several years of unusual business activity. Population increased to such an extent that in the late summer of 1857, a petition was circulated and signed by a large majority of the citizens asking for incorporation as a town. An election was held on January 2nd, 1858, with 32 votes cast in favor and none against. So on March 11th, 1858, the county commissioners ordered the incorporation. And Chesterfield, by the way, is going to have a celebration this coming March 11th, where they're going to celebrate that with the day's activities and so forth. And I get to be a part of that, and I'm really pleased that they've asked me to come over and do that. Mill Creek was the name given to the post office at Chesterfield. It opened on March 15, 1827, and continued to be known by that name until it was changed to Chesterfield on February 9, 1848. Amasa and son George Makepeace were the only postmasters during its 21 years of operation. The name must have had some lasting recognition, as it appears on 1864 and 1870 county maps. And that's Mill Creek. And here you see Mill Creek designated on this map, 1839. And here you see it again. And yet again. Historic Chesterfield. I'm fascinated by that little community, as I am with several of them in the county, but Chesterfield, there's just something special about it to me. This is a plat map of Chesterfield dated 1901, and unlike a lot of plat maps that I show out in the county, the communities have not grown much since the plat map. You don't see a lot of difference between 1901 and 2023, but Chesterfield's not that case. You can see how Chesterfield has grown. I'll back that up. Here's Mill Creek, nothing basically east of Mill Creek. Well, today, Mill Creek just kind of divides the town. So in 1827, Amasa Makepeace Sr. built in Chesterfield, Union Township, the first house in all of Madison County. This was not a one-story, rough-hewn log cabin with a dirt floor as most early settlers were living in. This home was an impressive two-story structure, framed and finished with planed lumber and insulated with plaster instead of mud chinking and daubing. The Amasa Makepeace Sr. Interesting, you look at that, and obviously that's not a period piece, but look at the chimney. Yeah. That chimney is. And how I know that, I used to be a radio guest, or guest on a radio show hosted by Doug Zook. Maybe some of you caught it. And we'd have people who would call in and sometimes come in and be guests with us on the radio show. And one time, a lady came in and she was our guest, and she lived in the house. And so she was telling me off air all of the neat things about this house. And one of them is that is the original chimney to the house. Her husband went down beneath the house in the crawl space there and checked things out, and he says that is original to the house. This is the Allen Makepeace house. I'm told it was built about 1850. Today it's been made into numerous apartments and is not open for the public to see. At least it wasn't the last time I checked into it. But this is the backside of it. But then across the street is his brother George's house, and it's also 1850. And I have been in that house. I've been on the first floor of it. What's interesting to me was that originally this was an apothecary, a pharmacy. And you notice the step up to the doors. That was because the wagons would pull up there to pick up or make deliveries, and that was the door that was used for the apothecary. Interesting place inside. And there you see them side by side. Standouts in Chesterfield, I think. Mm-hmm. Kind of good bookends. This is a pillar that has an M on it dated 1823, and I don't believe that's there anymore. Of course, it's known for Camp Chesterfield, spiritualist camp. That's a whole nother story unto itself. We had 3 families in this area that were spiritualists that started it. One was the Bronnenbergs, the Carol Bronnenberg. I showed you their home earlier, the one that I told you there was a tunnel underneath the Carol Bronnenberg. The other was a Dr. Westerfield and his wife. And the third one was Dr. Hilligoss and his wife. And you should know that. If you don't know that name, you certainly know the Hilligoss children. Yeah. West Maplewood Cemetery, the 2 children that have the flowers in their hand. Well, both of those children died tragically at young ages. Parents had those statues of them executed in Italy of Italian marble. They came in through the port of New Orleans, made their way up here, and for years, Dr. Hilligoss and his wife, who were spiritualists now, and of course spiritualists believe basically everything that Christians believe, with the exception is they believe they can communicate with the spirits. That's the big difference. And he and his wife would pull up on Grand Avenue in a horse and buggy on a Sunday afternoon and spend the whole Sunday afternoon with their children. For years they did that. And so that's a long answer to your question, but it was founded in 1891, and Carol Brandenburg gave the property for the spiritualist camp, Bruce. Sly Fork. Sly Fork is here. Sly Fork Station was a stop on the old Panhandle Railroad, about 3 miles directly south of Chesterfield, about midway between Anderson and Middletown. When the railroad was completed in the mid-1850s, Sly Fork was established to serve the town of Chesterfield, which by that time was a going concern. There was a platform beside the tracks, but as far as is known, there was never a station or a rail spur there. Warehouse was maintained at the site by a man by the name of James Ross. That building burned in 1871. Freight bound for Chesterfield was unloaded from the Panhandle cars on the Sly Fork platform, then hauled the rest of the way to Chesterfield by an ox cart. There was a general store in the settlement operated by Benengall and Tucker, and later by Burr and Wendell. It was during the latter occupancy that it burned. There was a post office at Sly Fork named Branson's that operated from January 20th, 1862 until it closed May 31, 1866. You might question why you'd have two names for the same area, Sly Fork and Branson's. That's because the United States Post Office reserved the right to name its post offices the names that it wanted to give them, and more than likely there was another Sly Fork, Indiana somewhere. And so before zip codes, how do you know which Sly Fork to deliver it to? So they would create their own name. By 1874, nothing to indicate the town except a few empty houses remained. Short distance northeast of Sly Fork, Sly Fork and Mill Creek take their rise. The former flows south into Fall Creek and the latter north into White River near Chesterfield. And I show that to you. Here's Chesterfield. Mill Creek takes its rise here and flows north to the White River. Sly Fork takes its rise here and it flows south to Fall Creek. This is a divide, if you will. And I know of only one other place in Madison County where that occurs, and that's north of Summitville, where Mud Creek and Back Creek both take their rise within sight of each other, but both flow in opposite directions. So if anybody ever tells you that rivers and streams don't flow north, they do. You see a designation there for Sly Fork on the map. Bubbling Springs. Bubbling Springs is right out here on the county line, separating Madison County and Delaware County. It was a name given to an area on the east side of County Road 500 East and the north side of State Road 32 intersection. At one time, it was an interurban stop and a gas station. An artesian well was located there, providing the name. And again, using my friend Google Earth, I show you where Bubbling Springs was located. And then I'm going to call your attention to this pond here, this farm pond. This whole area has a very high water table, so much so that you do not have to go very far to hit water, and hence Bubbling Springs, its name, because the water was so prevalent there that it bubbled up out of the ground. This is that pond I was telling you about, which is, the Bubbling Springs is up here, but you can see the farmer's pond here. And I'll come back to that. This is an old photograph we have here at the Historical Society of Bubbling Springs. I date this probably close to 1940, maybe 39, something like that. And what is unique about this photograph to me is this is an interurban car going out of existence, and this is what replaced it. A bus. Bus service replaced the interurban service. The interurban service closed here in 1941. Bus service came in about 1937, so it's in that era. And Bubbling Springs area today. Buckstown. Buckstown was here. Here's Chesterfield. Buckstown was here. The distinction of being the oldest named place in Union Township goes to a Delaware Indian village located on a bluff overlooking White River, about 1 mile northwest of Chesterfield. Established around 1815, it was called Kilbuckstown, or simply Buckstown, by the early settlers after the village chief, Captain Kilbuck, also known by his Christian name, Charles Henry Kilbuck. I find that Charles Henry Kilbuck had accepted Christ as his Savior in 1791 in the Detroit area. He was baptized by the Moravian missionaries, and so when he did, he took a Christian name. You know him today because of Kilbuck Creek and the other references to Kilbuck, but he was a Delaware chief, and I know that he was there around 1815, and I know he left this area around 1821. Last time I can find anything about him was in Missouri in 1825, and by then I assume he's probably either passed on from old age or the Delaware got into it with the Pawnee and the Osage out there, and he may have been killed in battle. I don't know. But his village was here. Again, here's Timberline Campground that we talked about, and the road coming out of Chesterfield that leads over to Emerald Glen. And the river comes down beneath the bridge and makes a big turn. His village was located on this high bluff overlooking the river, which was so typical of where the Delaware located their villages, always high enough that they could see an approaching enemy, and always near water, and always near ground that was tillable, and always within an area where there would be game to hunt. So it's it fits all the criteria for a Delaware village. And that's what it looks like today. Log cabin, canals, and one-room schoolhouses. In that barn is a log cabin. And there it is. The owner of the property had me come out one day to talk to me because she was concerned. Her grandfather had built this barn in 1901, and the barn was now leaning on the log house. And she was afraid that something was going to bring that down on the log house, and so she was concerned, is there anyone who can help with this dilemma? And I gave her a couple of names. But what's interesting to me is I went in the log cabin and began to look around, and the ceiling joists are logs with the bark still on them, which in Indiana means that it was built prior to 1838, because in 1838 in Indiana they began to remove the bark from logs because the bark would make the log sweat and rot the wood. So they removed it. So that's, I am told this by a person who is an authority on that. So that tells me that barn was built in prior to 1838. Could it be Frederick Brandenburg's cabin that he built north of White River? Do you remember I told you to remember that? Could it be? I don't know. I looked around for a guest book. Nobody signed a guest book in there, so I can't tell you. But it certainly it certainly is intriguing. Several years ago, in fact, more than that, it was about 12 years ago to be exact, I was doing a story on the hydraulic canals in central Indiana, in the Anderson area. And the owner of this property called me and he said, well, how about coming on out? He says, I'll show you the hydraulic canal that's on my property. Okay, so I made arrangements. I went out to see him, and we're off in this area here. And he keeps making reference to the canal over there. Well, the first time he said it, I just kind of let it go over. The second time he said it, I said, now wait a minute. You're telling me there's another canal over here? Yes. He says, is it part of this canal system? I said, no, because this is down along the river. The river is right here, and it's level with the river. We're up on the bank, the bluff that's up here, where the hydraulic canal was built. He makes several references to it, and I said, let's go see it. We walked down through this brush. This is a November day, and I stepped out into this, and my jaw dropped. Reason being, in the late 1830s, when the Indiana Central Canal was being built through this area, there was word but never proof that they were building a connector canal to connect Andersontown with Muncietown. I got a hold of a completion, what was known as a completion report that was given to the Indiana state legislators in 1840 that detailed all of the canal work in Madison County. No mention of this connector canal. I had read about it in history books, was curious, but didn't know where it was, thought maybe somehow it got absorbed into the hydraulic canal that was built in the late 1860s. But when I saw this, I said to myself, that's it. Because that's the footprint of the Central Canal. That's what it looks like. And I turned to this fellow and I said, you are the only property owner in Indiana that has two canals from different eras on your property. Nobody else can say that. You're seeing about the extent of it, the length. It was originally 6 feet deep. Now it's only about, well, this is about a 2-foot drop from the towpath. This is all silted in. Over the years, White River has flooded and it's filled all that in. But can you see just how obvious that is? That is really a neat find.
Trees haven't even grown back on it.
Trees have not grown back on it, no.
That's weird. Singular.
Speaking of the hydraulic canal, when they built the hydraulic canal from Daleville to Anderson in the 1860s and early 1870s, they used the White River as its source of water. It was not the type of canal that took canal boats. It was a canal that was used for its hydropower. Because the elevation at Daleville is 44 feet higher than it is at Anderson, is one of the reasons why Daleville looks down on Anderson. But that elevation causes that 44-foot drop from Daleville to Anderson, and that's enough flow, enough drop in elevation that it generates enough flow of water that it would operate mills built along, and that was the object of it, was to operate the mills that were going to be right down here at 10th and Main, or at Main Street, around 5th and Main. Knowing that the White River occasionally would get low in the summertime with water, they tapped into the bubbling springs era and they built this reservoir. I know that because a former member of this society, his grandfather, dug that. Not by himself, with help, but they dug that. And if you look at old county maps in Madison County, you will see the word reservoir written in this area right here. So that is historic in itself. About 7 years ago, I took this picture in March of '09. Several years ago, I was in this room, standing in this spot, when a lady came up to me and she said, got some bad news for you. I said, what's that? And she says, well, you remember the reservoir? I said, yeah. She says, it is no more. And so I took my camera and went out there, take a look at it. That's what it looks like today. A cut had been made here to drain it. And so today, that's what it looks like. I took that in July of 2016. The owner, the property owner, did not like the appearance of it before. She did not like that appearance. scummy, and so she cut it to drain it. In Union Township, there are some old one-room schoolhouses. I told you earlier of my infatuation for them. This is called the Cup and Saucer School. I don't have a picture of it with me, but on the back side in the brick, there is a configuration on the brick that looks like a teacup sitting on a saucer. This is the original Kilbuck School, still standing. Or not Kilbuck, I'm sorry, Valley Grove, thank you. It's the original Valley Grove School. In 1932, this society purchased the 100-year-old 15 by 20 foot Daniel Nolan cabin, which was located 2 miles south of Chesterfield, from Daniel's son Andrew for $20. Now, Daniel's son Andrew lived in California, and the Historical Society wanted that cabin because Mounds Park had just opened 2 years earlier. And the Historical Society was pushing the state of Indiana to create a pioneer setting in that state park. They thought that would be a nice place to feature the pioneer era of Madison County and all around central Indiana. So to help with that, we found the officers of the Historical Society in 1932, found this log cabin, and found who owned it. He was living in California. They called him, and he wanted $20 for it. This Historical Society has never been blessed with money. And I looked up, just out of curiosity, what did our treasury have in it in 1932? We had $11.40 in our treasury. As I said, that's about where we are right now. Interest rates being low, we've not grown much. So a man by the name of Arthur Brady, who, if you are DAR, you know the Brady name well in Madison County. His wife was very active in the Kick the Weena chapter of the DAR, and she nudged her husband, and he forked up $20. He was a member of the Historical Society. Anyway, they bought the cabin. He donated the $20 cash. The Mountain State Park superintendent, a man by the name of E.P. Lacey, had it dismantled, logs numbered, and reconstructed. I found that in an August 20th, 1932 issue of the Anderson Daily Bulletin. They moved it, dismantled it, moved it to Mounds Park, and reassembled it. And there's what it looked like. Now, if you want to know where that was, remember the horse stables that were in Mounds Park? They would have been right behind it where that was. Mounds Park used that for a concession area for a number of years. I'll show you another picture of it. This would be up near where the swimming pool. Be up near where the swimming pool was. Well, it's not there now. So I got to curious, well, what happened to it? So I just dumb lucked, as a lot of things I find are dumb luck. I was stumbling through some of the meeting minutes for this Historical Society. Every time we have a monthly meeting, we take minutes. And I found in the meeting minutes, January 20th, 1874 meeting minutes, termites got it. Termites got it. So in 1874, it was gone. We finished today with the pioneer cemeteries, and I always begin this with a compliment to Melody Hall. She's a member of the Cemetery Commission, but she and her husband, Tom, also developed a website called Pioneer Cemeteries and Their Stories in Madison County. Excellent, excellent, excellent piece of work. I say that even though she's here.
I'll get it.
And it's with appreciation that I acknowledge her efforts in providing this information that follows. It's a reminder to us that we're all here today and we all enjoy what we enjoy today because of what people did before us. Mm-hmm. What people did before us. And I think it's important that we honor them. Breinberg Cemetery has a number of them in it. The oldest known date of death there in the cemetery that we can see on a stone, September the 19th, 1836. The Clem-Benzenbauer Cemetery, its location, oldest known date of death there is May of 1851. This is the County Infirmary Pottersfield, or the Poor Farm Cemetery. It is not a pioneer cemetery, but I show it just to honor those folks for you, because this is Anderson Airport property, and this is the Otterbein Cemetery, and the fence separating the two. And of course, there are burials in the Otterbein Cemetery, but those people who lived in the Poor Farm used to be where the airport is today. That was the Poor Farm, and they had deaths over the years, and they're buried in this area here in what's known as a potter's field for them. Its location, and the earliest known date of death there is August the 19th, 1899. This is, I think, that Poor Farm location there was like the third or fourth location for our poor farms in the United States, or in Madison County. The first one, do you know where the United States Post Office is on Rabel Avenue? That was the first Poor Farm. The Keesling, Ellison, New Keesling, Cummins Cemetery, you see a number of names. Those would be reflective of families that are buried in there, and the names of the cemetery is reflective of family names that are there. Its location, April 27th, 1859. The Otterbein that we just spoke of, its location, and the oldest known date of death there is April 30th, 1825. So you can see that's some of the very early burials, and that is significant because Chesterfield and Union Township was very early in our history. Destroyed is the Hurley Cemetery. And with that, folks, today we are done.